in to CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. Right now, voters are casting their ballots in two high-stakes elections. The results could be the first real litmus test on how voters are really feeling about President Trump's policies. Elon Musk has been pouring money into the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, one that could shift the balance of power for the highest court in the key swing state. And two congressional seats in Florida are up for grabs. The results of those could give the GOP some breathing room in their control of the House or shrink it to a razor-thin margin. Plus, pink slips, long lines, and confusion, the layoffs impacting agencies responsible for tracking disease and regulating our food. Meanwhile, all eyes are on the White House and those reciprocal tariffs set to roll out tomorrow. The president saving details of those tariffs for the ceremony in the Rose Garden tomorrow. The title of this event, Make America Wealthy Again. Now, we still don't know the exact shares of those tariffs and the nations that it will impact. Reporters in the White House briefing room right now questioning Caroline Leavitt on that very topic just moments ago. Take a listen.
It's perceived by some that companies or countries, if they change their policies either before tomorrow or after tomorrow, can have the president alter what he's planning for that country or that sector. Is that a possibility? And if so, what factors the president consider in making those changes?
Well, the ultimate change for these companies and these countries, Mark, will happen when they decide to do business in the United States of America. And as I just laid out, they will face no tariffs at all if these companies choose to invest here in the United States and to move their production and their manufacturing here to the United States as well.
All right, let's go live now to CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. Olivia, did the White House reveal any other details about what's to come tomorrow?
Not very much, Liz. We did not get very much more details about what specifically tomorrow is going to look like. You heard Caroline Leavitt there in the White House press briefing saying that tomorrow there will be an event. It will happen tomorrow afternoon, and it's going to be part of Trump's Liberation Day called Make America Wealthy Again is this event. It's what they're billing it as. But as far as the very specifics that we have been asking, we still don't quite know what the tariffs will look like. Caroline herself even said that Trump is also meeting with his economic advisors to really firm up what exactly they will look like, meeting with them today even, for tariffs that are set to go into effect tomorrow. What seems to be the most likely scenario is what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent laid out a few weeks ago, which is that there will be a 15% tariff on products from what's considered the worst trading partners for the U.S. And a lot of them are allies. This is what we've been hearing from the president himself, where he says the U.S. is getting, quote, ripped off by other countries. He often cites Canada and a 250% tariff that they have on some U.S. dairy products that cross the border. Other targets we could see tomorrow are potentially lumber, pharmaceutical industries. These are kind of the little blips of focus that we've been hearing, but we have not gotten that full picture. The White House says we're still expected to get it tomorrow, perhaps tomorrow afternoon. They say within 24 hours, we should know exactly what tariffs will be in place and exactly how that's going to impact the American economy.
And Olivia, Caroline Leavitt also touched on the Maryland dad who was accidentally deported to El Salvador. What did she say on that?
Yeah, this is quite an interesting story. It's been evolving over the last 24 hours. We heard of a Maryland father who the White House and this administration alleges is not only an MS-13 gang member, but now they're saying he is the leader of a local MS-13 gang. And as a result, he was deported to El Salvador. Now, yesterday, they did admit in a filing that there was a clerical error on his deportation. Caroline Leavitt from the podium today addressing this. She said that they have evidence that this father was involved in human trafficking. They have credible intelligence, they're saying, that proved he was a member of this gang. But our Nancy Cortez actually pressed Caroline on this, saying there was a judge that did say that this individual must stay in country. And Caroline responded that this was an immigration judge who works for the DOJ at the direction of the Attorney General, whose name is Pam Bondi, essentially saying that this is someone, a judge who's working for the DOJ and working at their direction. So a lot of questions still remaining about this particular case, but overall goes to show a lot of these deportations that are happening very quick, very swiftly, not able to be fought out in the courts. These people not able to argue that they have a reason or they should be allowed to stay here, or that they're not even a member of this particular gang or a gang at all. So kind of giving us a quick snapshot of how quickly these deportations are happening and perhaps any errors as a result.
CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. Thanks so much, Olivia. All right, taking now to Capitol Hill, where Senator Cory Booker is delivering a marathon speech right now. The New Jersey Democrat has been on the Senate floor for about 18 hours. The purpose of this? Protesting policies of the Trump administration. Now, that speech started last night at 7 p.m., going well into the morning hours, and now the afternoon. So he did temporarily suspend his speech right around noon for the chaplain's Senate prayer, but the senator picked right back up after that. And I want to turn now to CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Hugh-Burns. Caitlin, you've been listening to all of this. What can you tell us about what he said? Unfortunately, we weren't able to play the sound, but what's been the response from other Congress members?
Well, Liz, this is all about messaging. You mentioned that he took to the floor around 7 p.m. last night, and he hasn't stopped talking. He's taken a few breaks here and there, and some of his Senate colleagues have filled in those gaps. But basically, he is trying to show that Democrats are doing something, in their view, to stand up to this administration. Now, is this going to yield any results? Is this going to change anything? Is this going to stop anything? The answer is no. Basically, what it's doing, it's holding up any sort of action on the Senate floor until whenever he stops speaking. So any votes that they were going to take today have been pushed back. But really, this is all about messaging and trying to talk to constituents who, Democrats have been getting lots of feedback from their constituents who believe that they're not doing enough to stand up to this administration, in their view. So Democrats have been trying to figure their way out of the wilderness, figure out how to make some sort of difference when they're in the minority in both chambers of Congress, and obviously having lost the White House this past election. They're trying to figure out how to exert whatever leverage they have, or at least show constituents that they're doing what they can to speak to the concerns that their constituents have. Now, this isn't really going to yield anything, as I said, but it does matter in terms of the politics and the messaging, how this is viewed by the base.
Yeah, to be clear, this is not a filibuster. This is really just to make a statement by the Democratic Party here.
Yeah.
I want to move on to this. The role of federal judges has really come into play in recent weeks as the Trump administration facing mounting legal challenges on a number of different policies. There was a House hearing today, and it's addressing the power of the judicial branch. What are you learning from that?
Yeah, and this is interesting, Liz, because Congress does have control over, or jurisdiction over, lower courts, not the Supreme Court, but lower courts. And we've seen that the lower courts have been making decisions, judges have been making decisions that have stopped, at least temporarily, some of the things that the Trump administration is trying to do through executive order. Some of these mass firings, for example, and other executive actions taken by this administration. So you've had Republicans up here on Capitol Hill, especially on the House side, raising concerns about the idea that one district court judge could stop the president's executive actions. So they are working on legislation, working to pass legislation this week, the House is, that would rein in some of this power that lower courts have. Their argument is that they want to exercise checks and balances here. It does open the question, though, about what this would mean in a different administration. Right? If a different party was in power and different judges were exercising their authority there as well. So that's an existing question, but you are likely to see a vote this week on legislation, at least on the House side. Not clear yet whether the Senate would take that up.
And Caitlin, before you go, I want to ask you about this. There's been a push in the House to allow new parents to vote remotely after having a baby. What's the very latest on that?
Yeah, this is a fascinating dynamic up here on Capitol Hill. On the House side, you have to be in person to vote on anything. There was an exception made during the pandemic where lawmakers could vote by proxy, and that was rescinded after the pandemic by House Republicans. There is a discharge petition waged by a Republican member of Congress along with Democrats who say that they want to move to the floor a bill that would allow proxy voting for new mothers, those who have just given birth. And that was presented by a couple of moms up here on Capitol Hill, including a Republican, Anna Maria Luna. Now, Representative Luna has been pushing House Republicans, you see there on the screen, has been pushing House Republican leadership to take up a vote on this measure. And Speaker Johnson has said that he doesn't want this to go through. He is arguing that this is a constitutional issue, that allowing proxy voting for new mothers would open the floodgates, in his words, to proxy voting for just about anything or anyone else. So there is that concern that he has been saying. But you do have this, groundswell of support. Many members had signed this petition to get this to the floor, and right now House leadership is trying to prevent that. Around 1:30 today, just in a few minutes here, we're going to have a vote on a rules package that would be aimed at not allowing this to go to the floor. So we're keeping an eye on that, but this is really aimed at allowing new mothers to be able to vote when they're on leave after just having a baby.
Yeah, we'll be anxiously awaiting the results of that. All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, thanks so much for that. Coming up, new evidence in the death of the son of a former Yankees player. You're watching CBS News 24/7. An update now in the case of Luigi Mangione. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi directing federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty for the 26-year-old accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. In a written statement, she said Mangione's act was premeditated and cold-blooded. The Department of Justice calls it an act of political violence. Mangione remains behind bars in a Brooklyn detention center. New developments now in the mysterious death of 14-year-old Miller Gardner, the son of retired New York Yankee Brett Gardner. Investigators now say the teenager may have suffered carbon monoxide poisoning during a family vacation to Costa Rica. CBS News correspondent Jerika Duncan breaks it all down for us.
A lot of people concerned about what actually happened here. Officials in Costa Rica made the announcement yesterday during a news conference saying tests were conducted last Friday in the family's room at the Arenas del Mar Hotel. The investigation revealed high levels of carbon monoxide pollution detected. Officials also noted that the location of a hotel room was near a mechanical room where some, quote, type of contamination is believed to have existed. The discovery now leading investigators to believe that Miller may have died from inhaling the dangerous gas. Miller died suddenly nearly 2 weeks ago while on vacation in Costa Rica after he and a few other family members came down with a mysterious illness. In an obituary posted online, the family wrote, quote, Miller's time here with them was brief, but his spirit will carry on forever through those who were impacted by the way he lived. Jerika Duncan, CBS News, New York.
The U.S. Army has announced the recovery of the body of a fourth U.S. soldier on board a sunken vehicle in Lithuania. All 4 soldiers went missing a week ago while on deployment in the Baltic country. They were tasked with towing an immobilized vehicle. Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Chanel Call, who is following this story for us. Chanel, what do we know?
Well, Liz, the Army making this announcement just moments ago, saying the bodies of all 4 soldiers who went missing during that training exercise last week when their armored vehicle essentially became submerged in a peat bog have now been found. The soldiers were part of a combat team that was working in Lithuania. And I should mention the identity of that 4th soldier, whose body was just found today, has not yet been released, as authorities are now working to notify their family. This, of course, comes after a pretty exhaustive 7-day search search and recovery efforts by hundreds of rescue workers from American, Lithuanian, Polish, and Estonian forces. Take a look at the images here. You can see they needed this really heavy machinery in order to get this work done. Those forces who were there working on the ground, they were essentially working around the clock, Liz, to find those soldiers in pretty challenging, pretty tough conditions, including, as you see here, thick forest and pretty swampy terrain. The soldiers' bodies will soon be returned home, and in the meantime, we know the U.S. Army and Lithuanian authorities are now trying to investigate the cause of that accident.
CBS News correspondent Chanel Call, thank you so much, Chanel. All right, severe storms that swept through the Midwest over the weekend are being blamed for at least 7 deaths. 4 of those deaths in Michigan, where Governor Gretchen Whitmer has declared a state of emergency in 10 counties. And that severe weather moved on to southeastern Alabama, where a suspected tornado ripped through a school near the Alabama and Georgia state lines. Several students were injured when part of that roof collapsed. CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry is in Alabama with the very latest on the damage there.
This is the mangled mess here in Dothan, Alabama, following Monday's severe storms in this area. This structure is now twisted metal, downed power lines, and additional debris. We're only about 2 blocks away from Dothan Prep. About 1,500 students go to the school. Parents who we spoke with said that their kids were inside of the gymnasium at the time of the suspected tornado when they noticed the ceiling lights begin to flicker, and then part of said ceiling then collapsed. Now some students say that they are concerned about going back into the building. We know that the district said that 5 had to either be seen by medical professionals on site or taken to area hospitals. They are all okay. Now the National Weather Service is here in the city assessing the damage.
Well, our social team has more content just like this on TikTok and Instagram, so give us a follow using the handle CBS News. Let's take a live look now at Oklahoma City, where a new storm system is gaining strength over the Central Plains and Rockies, bringing the chance of heavy thunderstorms. Jess, it seems like this part of the country just cannot get a break. We talk about them every week.
I know. So we kicked off this week, keep in mind, with severe storms sweeping more south, closer to Alabama and all the way over into communities like Atlanta, where, remember, we were just reporting on how they had to divert all those aircraft away from the airport because it was sweeping throughout those areas. And it was so active with thunderstorm activity, damaging winds, hail, all of the above. But now we're getting around 2 of that today. As we head into this afternoon and into the overnight hours tonight, we're gearing up for the next big storm system that's on the back end of the first one, bringing in very similar characteristics. More rain, more snow to the north. We're also dealing with damaging winds, possible tornadoes throughout these communities. And on top of all of that, as we head into the next 24 to 48 hours, we could really see localized flooding in certain communities just north of the Mississippi. So take a look behind me. I want to dive straight into this forecast and kind of time this out. The one that came in and brought in heavy thunderstorm activity to Atlanta all the way over into Alabama and Mississippi, that's now tracking north and pushing offshore of the East Coast as we head into the afternoon hours today. Now on the back end of that is storm number 2 that we're concerned about. This one is cooler up north, so it'll bring in plenty of snow for our friends near the Great Lakes, all the way over into Minnesota too. But on the south end of that, it's a lot warmer. And as this tracks slowly to the east, this one's going to linger a bit longer in certain states like Kentucky over into Tennessee. The big concern with this one will be localized flooding in those communities on top of thunderstorm activity with damaging winds. And like I said, possible activity for tornadoes. So our severe weather outlook for tonight at least shows that enhanced risk in that orange color directly over areas like Oklahoma City up into Wichita and Kansas City. We extend to our forecast tomorrow. Notice how much more widespread this becomes. That means we can see that tornado activity in states like Tennessee, all the way over into St. Louis, Missouri. We're going to monitor this closely. And on top of that, the National Weather Service has already issued flash flood watches and warnings. We're going to monitor this as well. Back to you, Liz.
Jess, thanks so much. Jury selection is underway in the second trial of a Massachusetts woman charged with killing her police officer boyfriend. Karen Reed is accused of hitting John O'Keefe with her SUV and then leaving him dead in January of 2022. Reed says she is not guilty to second-degree murder and other charges. CBS News Boston reporter Penny Kmitt has the latest from outside the courthouse.
Jury selection is now underway for the very high-profile Karen Read retrial, and it started just how we expected it to. The judge asked if anyone had heard about this case, discussed this case, formed opinions on this case, and dozens of potential jurors raised their hand. It's hard to imagine anyone who hasn't heard about this case. That's why we know over 200 potential jurors have been summoned for today, and there's currently a jury pool of over 1,000 people. So to put this into some perspective, Karen Read's first trial, about 400 potential jurors were screened, and of that, 75% of them had raised their hands, just like we saw this morning. And since then, there's been TV specials, a docu-series, hundreds of people talking about this trial online. So the judge thinks it's going to take weeks before they find an impartial jury. When we do eventually get to some opening statements and testimony, our legal analyst predicts that the second trial is going to look a little bit different. The defense, it's believed, instead of pointing the finger at other suspects at a cover-up, really honing in on that theory, instead they may focus a little bit more on what they believe to be a shoddy police investigation. And as for the prosecution, which is now led by Hank Brennan, a new prosecutor, it appears that he plans to use Read's own words against her. Read had said in a recent interview that immediately after John O'Keefe's death, she hypothesized with her lawyers maybe she ran over her boyfriend's foot or clipped him. The prosecution did try and request those texts from Read and her lawyer in the first few days following John O'Keefe's death, but that request was denied. And the judge was very clear with the jurors this morning. She said that any potential juror needs to decide the fate of Karen Read inside the walls of the courthouse here. It will not be decided outside of the courthouse. That's why the buffer zone, this case is known to have a lot of people protesting during it. The buffer zone has been extended to 200 feet around the courthouse. That might be why you don't see anyone behind me right now. Back to you.
Thank you, Penny. Well, people whose job it is to track disease outbreaks and monitor the safety of food and medicine are now out of a job. It's just the latest round of massive cuts to the federal government. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Let's take a live look at how the market is reacting ahead of that new round of tariffs set to roll out tomorrow. Tariff uncertainty continuing to rattle Wall Street, as you can see there. So much so that yesterday, 2 out of 3 major U.S. stock indices had their worst quarter since 2022. Caroline Levitt asked if the president is concerned about the swings hitting the stock market lately, and she said this. Take a listen.
The president takes those concerns very seriously, and he's addressing them every single day. And tomorrow's announcement is to protect future generations of the senior citizens you mentioned. It's for their kids and their grandkids to ensure that there are jobs here in the United States of America for their children to live the American dream, just like they presumably did. And as for their worries about their 401ks, their Social Security, I just addressed Social Security. This president is always going to protect it for our tax-paying senior citizens. As for their 401ks, look at what President Trump did for you in his first term. He is working on implementing that economic formula every single day by lowering inflation, lowering energy prices, massive deregulatory efforts, while simultaneously effectively implementing tariffs.
Okay, let's bring in CBS News contributor J.D. Durkin. J.D., we just heard what Caroline said, but what do you think? I mean, should Americans on a fixed income be concerned about these tariffs?
Yeah, I've been talking with a lot of economists and experts in the financial space over the last few months, as we knew that something like the so-called Liberation Day, as the president likes to call, would be on the horizon. The big challenge is that we don't exactly yet know what these tariffs are going to look like. Will there be reciprocal tariffs? Will there be special political carve-outs for their opponents? So what experts say, if you are in that situation where you're a bit worried about your 401k's personal performance, now is maybe not a great time necessarily to withdraw, because if you withdraw from your account, you automatically lock in those losses. On the flip side, you could be subjected to unexpected taxes. This is a time when economists and I think wealth advisors are telling their clients, maybe consider adjusting or rotating out of some of the parts of your portfolio that might be a bit consolidated, like a lot of the big tech names, and consider some other parts of the S&P 500 or things like precious metals, which have really outperformed so far here in 2025, speaking to that overall flight to safety, or that so-called hedge that is popular in the wealth management space.
And JD, the president says he's concerned about Main Street, not Wall Street. But what are economists saying about that? Doesn't one impact the other?
Yeah, it's worth always reminding, as I like to say, the economy is not the stock market, but there is a close correlation to the two. More than 60% of Americans do directly own stocks, and 70 million Americans in one form or another do have a 401k. But ultimately, when you talk about the squeeze of tariffs, small businesses will likely be disproportionately impacted, whereas the bigger companies, the big splashy pro-growth companies, they could probably do a better job absorbing some of the pressure points from tariffs, but small businesses will more than likely need to pick up a lot of that slack, pass on some of those price increases down on to consumers, plus to say nothing about a gunked up supply chain. So while it's one thing for the White House to say we are focused on Main Street, not on Wall Street, economists are very quick to say both Wall Street and Main Street are going to have big sweeping repercussions, not just from tariff policy, but especially one like this, the likes of which there are still so many details. One day out, we still don't yet know.
JD Durkin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, from Wall Street to the voting booth. Voters going to the polls in two very high stakes, closely watched elections. One in Florida. High voter turnout reported in the race for two congressional seats there, vacated by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, now at the center of the Signal group chat controversy. And of course, Matt Gaetz, whose political fortunes fell when a House ethics report derailed his chances to become the Attorney General. Now to Wisconsin, where Elon Musk has been wearing cheese hats and pouring in millions to the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. Voters there choosing a new justice for the top court in the swing state, and the results could swing the balance of power. And the whole campaign has become the most expensive judicial contest in U.S. history. I want to bring in Columbia University political science professor Robert Shapiro now. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. We're seeing all of that money pouring into this race. Can you give us some perspective on this? Do you think this kind of financial support for these local and state elections is only going to get more crazy in the next 4 years?
Well, the reason money is pouring in is that these elections are seen as harbingers for future elections, and in particular in Wisconsin, what's at stake here are judicial deliberations about the configuration of congressional and legislative districts, and I think the money will pour in, particularly in races that are crucial. What we're seeing in Wisconsin is really off the charts here. It's really quite extraordinary. Wisconsin was a key state. The configuration of congressional districts there are very important. Voter turnout there is very important. And what the money does in these elections, if not swaying people, is it can have the effect of mobilizing voters to a very strong degree, with Musk trying to spend money to mobilize Republicans, but also producing perhaps a Democratic backlash to mobilize Democratic voters.
Now, are there any limitations when it comes to this kind of campaign fundraising? Are there any rules?
Yeah, well, the thing is, there are rules, and they're strict with regard to contributions directly to the candidates, which the candidates themselves spend. But with regard to money, especially money given by an individual, that's considered free speech. And if that individual wants to spend money on getting out the vote, campaigning for a particular candidate, the spending there is unlimited. And it's not just this case of Wisconsin. This is the widespread phenomenon of how more general money goes into campaigns. That's not directly controlled by the candidates themselves.
And moving now to Florida here, two House seats are up for vote today. Republicans, as we know, have a razor-thin majority in the House. They're going to need every vote to pass Trump's agenda. So what do you make of these two races?
Well, these races are very important in order for the Republicans to keep their current very slim majority. I think that's something that's very important here. But what these races are also showing is to what extent Republicans still have this very strong base of support that will lead into the midterm elections. And this is sort of a potential harbinger for the midterm elections, where normally the incumbent party would be expected to lose seats, but the Republicans will fight very vigorously to maintain control of the House. And the control of the House is very crucial to basically passing legislation and also protecting Donald Trump from a possible impeachment by a Democratic-controlled House of Representatives.
All right, we'll be watching. Columbia University professor Robert Shapiro, thank you so much. Well, we are following breaking news out of Boston. Multiple people hurt in a truck crash there. Let's go to our partners at CBS News Boston just moments ago.
We are following breaking news. Now, right now, you are looking at live pictures. Now, this is a truck that has crashed into a building at Neelan and Harrison Streets. Multiple folks have been injured. We have seen at least 2 people loaded into ambulances. You can see a box truck has flipped over on its side, and several people have been taken away on stretchers. Now, as we said, this is Harrison and Neelan Streets. Both are closed between Tyler and Washington Streets. We are waiting to receive more information, and we'll update you as soon as we get it. Again, a truck has crashed into a building at Neelan and Harrison Streets. Multiple people, we are reporting, multiple people have had injuries and have been taken away to local hospitals. We, of course, will bring you the very latest as soon as we get it.
Our partners are at CBS News Boston covering that horrible truck crash into a building in the middle of Boston. We're told multiple people are injured. We're going to stay on top of that and bring you more as it comes in. Well, under the leadership of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., some employees are getting pink slips at the Department of Health and Human Services. The layoffs starting today, impacting agencies responsible for research, tracking disease, and even regulating food. Some employees found out that they lost their jobs when they arrived at work this morning. Some of them even discovered that their security badges didn't work. And in all the confusion, employees were stuck in long lines around the Health and Human Services building. Let's bring in CBS News reporter Alex Tin. You've been looking into this. Alex, how many employees are expected to be laid off today?
Yeah, so we know from the department that 10,000 employees at all the nation's health agencies are expected to be cut as a part of these layoffs. We knew that last week. What we didn't know was exactly who within those agencies would be cut. We're starting to learn about that now. For example, we've heard of some teams within the FDA, for example, at the Human Foods Program, where more than 200 employees were cut. We've heard of teams at the CDC where entire branches and divisions were cut. But of course, you know, the size of how many people were in those divisions sometimes hides the importance of those teams. Take, for example, the CDC's FOIA office. It's not that big. They handle records requests at the CDC. But all of the people in that small office were cut. Who knows what's going to happen to records requests that are now supposed to be processed by the agency, where all of the people handling them have been let go.
And what kind of impact could these layoffs have on everyday Americans?
Yeah, we're still putting together the pieces on what exactly is happening as a result of these cuts. You know, we have heard, for example, from the department that they've said that, you know, a lot of the day-to-day work at these agencies wasn't supposed to be impacted by these cuts. Things like, you know, FDA drug approvals, things like FDA food safety inspections, the CDC's response to ongoing outbreaks like that measles outbreak in Texas. But at the same time, we are now hearing that a lot of the support staff that have been cut at these agencies, including at the CDC and FDA, are directly impacting the work of these people who are still on the job. You know, HR staff, support staff, IT staff, who have all been cut from these agencies with little notice to their managers or to agency leadership.
Yeah, the Trump administration making good on their promise to overhaul so many of these federal agencies. Alex, are we expecting any other major changes at the Health and Human Services?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, these cuts are within a broader restructuring that Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has ordered at the department. There are going to be some major mergers that health officials are trying to do pretty soon, within the next 10 days or so, to combine some of these agencies together. They're creating a new one called the Administration for a Healthy America that's supposed to kind of take a grab bag of what's remaining from some of these offices, you know, that have survived these cuts and merge them together. That includes everything from worker safety at CDC all the way over to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Is there a concern, though, Alex, is with all these massive layoffs happening in, you know, just a matter of a couple days here, that the real jobs that they're doing every day, what they're really responsible for, those are going to be halted until they kind of figure out their way through all of these adjustments?
Yes, you know, everyone that I've spoken to at these health agencies has that exact concern. And part of it is the way that these layoffs happened. You know, it's not like leadership had input into these cuts. In many situations, we were told managers not only had no input into who was cut, but also had no idea that their staff were cut. In fact, some of them have been asking their employees, can you tell me whether you were laid off, because nobody has told me, and now I'm getting bounce backs when I try to reach out to you. So again, it is to put it mildly, chaos in many of these health agencies, and many of the health officials I talked to, like I said, are still putting together the pieces on what exactly was cut and how they're going to move forward now that not only their teams are cut, but a lot of the support teams too at HR, IT, and other departments within these agencies no longer are on the job.
Yeah. All right, CBS News reporter Alexander Tin, thanks so much, Alex. A survivor pulled from the rubble of a deadly earthquake after being stuck for 4 days. You're watching CBS News 24/7. We want to take you to Myanmar and the aftermath of that devastating 7.7 earthquake. Right now, United Nations agencies say shelter and medicine are in short supply, with clean water as a much needed priority there. Authorities say the death toll continues to tick up as well. More than 2,700 people have been killed and more than 4,500 injured. Rescue crews are doing everything they can to help those in need. Check out this video of crews carrying a 63-year-old woman who was trapped under the rubble for more than 91 hours. And experts say the likelihood of finding anyone alive after 72 hours drops drastically. Now to a new test for the Trump administration overseas. China launching another round of large-scale military exercises near the island of Taiwan, which has a democratically elected government. Anna Corin has the very latest on how the Trump administration is reacting to this.
In a show of force, China sent a dozen warships and over 70 military aircraft in drills encircling Taiwan. China's foreign ministry said the exercises are, quote, a strong deterrent against separatist forces advocating for Taiwan independence, calling Taiwan's president, Lai Ching-te, a parasite. This is not the first time. Back in May, a simulated attack on the territory included live-fire missile exercises. But today's move comes at a pivotal moment for the world economy, just a day before President Trump's anticipated tariff announcements. President Trump has recently said that an invasion of Taiwan would be catastrophic.
So it would have a big impact if something should happen with Taiwan.
At the end of his Asia tour on Sunday, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the U.S. would ensure a credible deterrence across the Taiwan Strait. And Taiwan is preparing, holding its own war drills in the critical waterway last month, simulating a Chinese invasion, calling China the world's biggest troublemaker.
All right, we have an update now out of Maryland, where we were following several schools that were placed on lockdown. CBS News correspondent Chanel Call joins us live now in our newsroom with an update on that. What can you tell us, Chanel?
Well, Liz, we've been tracking this story all day, and just moments ago, Baltimore police tweeted that barricade has ended. So we should see the school lockdowns lift soon as well, Liz. You'll remember earlier today we told you that 3 Baltimore area schools were locked down since this morning. This after a nearby resident called police because they noticed some shooting damage on their property at around 7:30 a.m. local time today. Now, when police arrived on scene, Liz, they say shots rang out, and then since then, police, crisis negotiators, and tactical teams have been on the scene at what appeared to be a commercial plaza, working to resolve the situation. Nearby residents, we know, were told to shelter in place during the situation. But again, police now say that barricade has ended.
Okay, that is good news. CBS News correspondent Chanel Call. Thank you so much, Chanel. Well, coming up in our Eye in America, they were the familiar voices on the radio that helped keep people safe during Hurricane Helene. Now they are using their voices to bring those communities together. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Well, it is our Eye on America, CBS News, following the human side of the headlines, telling stories from your communities. After Hurricane Helene devastated western North Carolina, we introduced you to a couple of broadcasters who played a critical role in keeping people informed. CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry shows us 6 months later, they've taken on a new role in the recovery, bringing communities together.
For the last 6 months, Mark Starling and Tank Spencer have been hard at work, expanding their job descriptions.
This is the first time that I've ever been proud to live somewhere.
They're not just the voices of AM radio here in western North Carolina.
They have just been such a lifeline.
They've been the voices of recovery amplifying the message of groups such as Valley Strong Disaster Relief.
We come together here.
Run by Jason Ward and his partners. Before Helene, their amphitheater was a crowd favorite for music. Now it's a place where folks can stock up on essentials they badly need.
We have a huge propane set up. We had a lot of our food and diapers and everything up on the stage.
You don't really notice until times of disaster what your community's really made of it.
It's 8:45. Starling and Spencer are connecting groups like Valley Strong with the people who need them the most.
They're going to make sure that everybody in that community, that nobody wants for anything.
Continuing coverage of the relief, rescue, and recovery operations from Tropical Storm Helene.
It's what they've been doing since we first met them last October in the aftermath of the storm.
This is the realest radio has ever been.
The AM radio host and producer manned the phones round the clock for days.
Picking up food and water.
With cell towers down and communications iffy at best, they became a way for people to ask for help.
The access to the information saved lives. The only thing that was left standing was AM and FM radio. And I think there's been a rediscovery of that.
This is The Rundown with Mark Starling.
6 months later, they're still at it.
You guys are really the only voices we had coming across the airways.
There's good that comes from the bad.
But I love you guys.
We love you, honey.
I'm so thankful you've been here and keeping us updated on everything.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. We're not going anywhere. Don't you worry about that.
Like most everyone in the area, the last 6 months have been an intense reminder that no one gets through this alone. Not the people of Western North Carolina, and not these two.
How are they faring after all of this? Because it was pretty bad, and it still is.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's a way that you can be okay.
Yeah, you can't forget
after
it.
something like that.
It changes everything for you.
Right.
It changes the value of everything.
Right.
The value of this friendship. I wouldn't make it without Tank Spencer.
And a lot of people might not be here without the AM radio station where Mark and Tank work. That's been saving lives with the turn of a dial. For Eye on America, I'm Skylar Henry in Asheville, North Carolina.
All right, let's take a live look now at Tucson, Arizona, where fire crews there on high alert this afternoon. A large swath of southern Arizona will be under a red flag warning with gusty winds and low humidity, upping that wildfire risk. And we've been saying it all day long, Jess. It just feels like we're always sort of in wildfire season, at least some part of the country we are.
Well, you're taking a look at this high desert, right, and how dry it is already. You add the strong winds with it. There's red flag warning conditions widespread throughout those communities. I want to break apart the reason why that's even happening. Right now, we're seeing wind gusts up to around 60 miles per hour in some of those southern portions. Now, all this pink you see on this map, I know it looks like a mess, but this is what the National Weather Service has issued. It's red flag warnings that will remain in effect throughout this afternoon. The tan color just above it are high wind warnings as well. So our fire risk is critical in those communities right now in southern portions of New Mexico, all the way into southern portions of Arizona, and stretched over into El Paso, Texas, too. This makes its way all the way up into Kansas and Oklahoma. As we head into the coming days, this is the epicenter when it comes to these strong winds that we're forecasting right now, anywhere up to around 65 mile per hour winds into New Mexico, just in the center of it as we head into the afternoon hours today. Those winds will continue to fuel these fire weather conditions into the evening hours tonight. Once we advance the clock into our Wednesday forecast, we watch those strong winds now move all the way over into areas like Kansas City. So for now, our critical fire weather conditions stretch across the south. In these states alone, relative humidity is expected to drop to about 15% heading into this afternoon. Over to you.
Thanks so much. Take a look at this. A volcano is erupting in southwestern Iceland. You can see the flames and smoke shooting through the air there. That eruption began just hours after authorities evacuated a nearby community, including Iceland's Blue Lagoon Spa, one of the island's biggest tourist attractions. I'm sure you've seen pictures of it. And about 40 homes in the area have had to be evacuated. Nearly a month after the Loch Ness Center reported its first potential sighting of the elusive Loch Ness monster, the UK's National Oceanography Centre stumbled upon yet another find. Take a look at this. One of their autonomous underwater vehicles, named my favorite, Boaty McBoatface, that's the name of the vehicle, discovered a 1970 camera used to capture the mythical creature. Okay, well, experts with the center say this camera was part of the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau's first attempts to use underwater photography in their search for Nessie. They developed the film, but so far, no sign of the Loch Ness monster. All right, well, we have much more ahead here on CBS News 24/7. The polls are open in Florida and Wisconsin. We are watching two high-stakes elections there that could be the key indicators of how voters are reacting to President Trump's sweeping policies. And in just a few minutes, Oscar-winning director Oliver Stone is set to testify to Congress about the newly released JFK files. Stone, if you remember, directed the 1991 film JFK, which portrayed the assassination as a government conspiracy. We'll have much more right here on CBS News 24/7.